Clint,
Colette,
how are you doing today?
I'm okay. I'm okay today.
Today,
Yeah,
in the middle of a holiday weekend,
yeah, yeah.
my
Had it.
children might come in screaming at any moment, just so you
Oh,
know.
good,
I did
good.
lock the door, but sometimes that doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah. My children are all away at the moment. Two of
Oh,
them are at camp, and one is shopping for camp.
amazing.
And tomorrow, my wife and I will be childless-ish, pretending for the first
Oh
time in 15 years. So
my gosh.
no children in the house.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We're not going to do any dishes. We're just going to
I was
sit
going to say,
around. We're gonna watch stupid reality shows that they don't like.
nice.
Yeah.
That'll be
Try to
great.
see some live music maybe if we can. There might
Cool.
be a few places to see that in LA that we never get to go to. So yeah, I'm excited, but I'm also like a little sad because it's like a preview of a
Yeah.
few years from now.
Yeah. Yeah. We were with the kids at a local deli named Singerman's the other day,
Ah,
and we were having some gelato with them. And this woman was, they were like being ridiculous. I think they were like climbing over, like leapfrogging over each other as like a game. And this woman who worked there was like, "Oh, I just miss my son so much. He just went to college." And we're like watching as they're like almost killing each other, like jumping on each other. And she's like, you just it's like right now, it's like I just don't think I appreciate it enough. I didn't memorize his voice. And like, I'm watching my children like beat each other with hammers in the
yeah.
corner, and I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, 75% of the time that you spend with your kids is before they go to college, right? It's like, that's it. Like,
Yep.
then you only have 25% more to go or something like that.
Yep. But yeah,
So
you were just saying, yes, we don't work anywhere
we
together
are
anymore.
officially no longer coworkers for the fourth or fifth time.
We'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah. Yeah. I found out yeah, I'm they like shut everything off on Thursday, and I was like desperately trying to be like, "No, I don't want you to have to like deal with this drive problem." Like I was like trying to remember what files to share with what people so that like
Oh
they
gosh,
didn't
yeah.
have to like, search through archived stuff or something. Um
It's so
so
strange how
hopefully
much
I
data we produce. Like every job I
right.
leave, I feel that way. Like, no, 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 this needs to get to someone, or does it?
Someone's going to need this at some point, I think, and I don't
Yeah,
know, maybe they won't, but also like uh yeah, it
they'll
is
just feed
pretty
it to an
wild.
AI. Ow. What
It
did
would be
Colette
cool.
know?
No, and that I mean like what if we created like AI personas for the people who left to like ask them questions?
I'm
Like
not sure I want to know how effective that would be.
can you take the Slack history combined with the Google Drive information and
The
like
Westworld,
yes.
Westworld using Slack and Google Drive. I'm in. Let's play. I want to do something with AI. Everything I do with it, it's just been disappointing, to be honest. Like the first 30% are great. Like, wow, that did some scaffolding for me. And then the next 70% are just, how do I tell it to, oh, just do it. Like, I'll just, and then you just do it. And then you ask it, how did you do? And it says, yeah, you did fine. And I have no idea if it actually knows, but trying so hard to make it work and help us with all this crazy, like, reliability work we have. And
Yeah.
there's like little AI buttons appearing on everything, and
Yeah.
some of them are very handy and some of them are very confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just doing I'm trying out different interior design 3D modeling thing software, and one of them has like an AI button where but all it does is like it actually makes a photorealistic picture of the thing that you've spent hours and hours putting in like a 3D modeling situation. Whereas I was like, in my head I was imagining I was like, "Oh no, I want to go to it and like read out all of the measurements that I have for the house, and then it just makes the thing for me, right?
Right.
That's what I thought it would do,
That
but
would be
no, it's like
useful.
you have to make the thing, and then it just turns it into a photorealistic picture. I was like, "Okay, well, it's still gonna be like 40 hours of work for me." Um, yeah, so I have no job. I'm free as a bird or something.
Exciting, terrifying.
Yeah, I think I'm excited and I'm terrified. I mean, I think I ultimately understood that even if I was on the road to recovery with my burnout, that I would not be on the road to recovery if I returned to that particular environment. And so I'm I'm glad that, I was able to take the time to figure that out, and then figured that out, and as soon as I figured that out, I said I can't do this. So yeah, I'm like interviewing, but yeah, I don't have anything lined up, so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, I'm glad you feel like you're on the road to recovery, closer to recovery than problems. Um, but I think it's really like I just keep coming back to the burnout episode we recorded at the beginning of this journey, and I get the most comments from people on it when they see me and they know the podcast. They're like, "Oh, I love the burnout episode." Um, so it feels like revisiting a little retro on that, maybe further down the road,
Yeah.
um, is due because people in our business, people who take responsibility for others, are bound to be prone to it. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you're moving forward, but I know it's going to be frustrating and hard because interviewing and finding jobs always is.
It's super scary, right? And I'm the health insurance carrier for my family. Like there's a lot of things, like even if we have, some money to float us for a little bit, there's things that are scary about stepping away from a role. And not the least of which, frankly, was I spent so much time building an entire organization full of wonderful people. And to walk away from that was really, really hard. So,
A highly effective organization that I work with every day and enjoy and appreciate and probably take a little for granted. So,
well,
thank you for that and best of luck in your future. But until then, we will continue to record
yeah.
podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, I still have a job. I told my husband I have podcasts to record.
Right.
I have a foundation to run. Uh, Speaking of which, we're gonna this is our July guest episode, a July guest episode, and we're gonna do we just finished nailing it down, but you're not gonna be there because you're gonna be in Australia, which sounds way more fun, to be honest, but that's okay. Uh,
I
we're
can't
gonna
do that. I'll
do
be upside down.
we're gonna do the all I could think of when it's upside down Australia is the Simpsons episode with the toilet water. Anyways, it's the worst. Um, we're gonna do a live version of this panel discussion with our friends Jed, John, and Chad. So they all went to Lund University at different times than me. Um, and we're going to talk to them about Lund University today, but we're also going to have like a live event affiliated with the Resilience and Software Foundation. That's going to be on July 31st at 3 p.m. Eastern. I will post a link to the event where you can register and become a member of RASF if you want. But you can ask live questions, AMA, anything Lund related. We would love to see you there. Do you have burning questions about Lund, Clint?
I feel like general curiosity. I wish I had thought it through more, so I could pass these on. Unfortunately, I can't join you for the panel, but because I have some life events happening. But I certainly, as somebody who has gone from sysadmin to SRE to safety interested engineer, like everybody who's talking to me about the right things, in my opinion, went to Lund. So, uh, how how do you do what you do? Like, can I? Uh, Should I? Those are the kind of questions I have. They're very personal, but
Okay.
it
Well,
clearly is an important program, and there's a lot for, I think, anybody who listens to this podcast to learn from people who've gone there, including yourself.
yeah. Well, hopefully we answer some of your questions to kind of give a little bit of a quick bios of the folks who are joining us. Jed Needle is an engineering manager in security and chaos platform engineering at Datadog. He is a current student at Lund. Before he was at Datadog, he was at Procore Technologies, and he also has a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry, which he talks a little bit about in the panel discussion, which is really cool. Chad Todd has worked in software engineering, systems engineering, and operations for over 20 years. He has a particular interest in systems thinking, incident management, incident response, incident analysis, and resilience engineering. Chad holds an MBA and recently graduated in 2022 with a Master's of Science in Human Factors and System Safety from Lund. And then somebody everybody is familiar with, I think, on the podcast, John Allspaw, has worked in software systems engineering and operations for over 20 years in many different environments. He wrote The Art of Capacity Planning and Web Operations. And the foreword to the DevOps Handbook, his talk at the 2009 Velocity Conference with Paul Hammond, 10 plus deploys per day, Dev and Ops cooperation helped start the DevOps movement. John served as CTO at Etsy, and he got his Master's of Science in Human Factors and System Safety from Lund in like 2013. He currently is a partner at Adaptive Capacity Labs. Hello. How's it going, everybody?
Amazing.
Great.
Welcome. We're so excited to have you here. I'm so excited to have you here, I should say. Clint is been called away on an incident, not a work incident, but a home pickup incident. So we're just gonna chat right now and about my favorite thing to chat about, which is Lund University. This is a slightly different. We didn't have like a question that in particular came in, although we have had a couple questions about like, where do you learn these things? How can I learn more about this subject or whatever? And so I'm very excited to introduce three people who have been through what I've been through recently, or depending on how you define recently, and have managed to get a Master's of Science in Human Factors and System Safety from Lund University in Lund, Sweden. So that's John Allspaw, Jed Needle, and Chad Todd. Thank you for joining us.
Colette, if I may,
Mhm.
I'm as his advisor, I need to probably make a quick little adjustment, a request that Jed has not received. His Jed is in the summer. Jed hasn't started course 6 yet.
Oh,
But
so you're in the middle of Lund, so you have an even better
Yes.
perspective, Jed. You're like,
Well,
you're neck deep in it.
I am quite neck deep in it, literally.
All right. Cool beans. All right. So I guess, Jed, then you would be the most recent sort of participant in Lund.
Correct.
I'm curious if we could start with you then.
Yeah.
What compelled you? Why? Why go to Lund?
It's a question I ask myself practically every day, Colette. Jokes aside, actually, it's interesting that the two other people that are on with us are the two primary reasons why I ended up being crazy enough to do it. Because John and Richard Cook came to my place of employment, my previous place of employment, and they did adaptive capacity labs stuff with us on incident analysis. And subsequently, I got connected to Chad Todd, who joined my team, and we worked together for a little bit more than a year, right, Chad? About 18 months. And during that time, Chad chipped away at my good sense by constantly schooling me on all sorts of human factors related things in a lot of the work that we were doing. And essentially really convinced me that this was a thing that was worth pursuing because he was so knowledgeable and so working with these two who happen to be here really oriented me towards this path that in many ways I was always interested in but didn't have a word for and didn't really know formally much about.
That's so cool. So you got introduced to it through other participants in the program.
Yes.
I'm curious because, like, it feels like we're all in the resilience and software Slack, right? And before that, were we all in the learning from incidents Slack too? I think so. But it does feel like there are informal communities, right, around
Yes.
this in software that have connections that talk with each other. There are blogs,
Yep.
people post things. So I'm curious, like, because that's a little bit participating in that level of community is different than going and getting like formally educated.
Yes.
What do you think made you kind of want to do that particular, like, what was attractive about getting a master's of science in this?
Me again?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a really shorter answer for that, which is I got into software as somebody who's trained in biochemistry. So I never really fully felt qualified formally to be doing what I was doing. And this was an opportunity to correct that in a sense, right? Where it's like, I can say that I've been formally trained, classically trained, if it, as it were. And I really sort of felt like it was on my list to pursue additional education throughout my life. I raised some kids and had other stuff going on, and they're, out of the house now. And it was sort of time to decide to do something for myself. And this is what I pursued because I was just so fascinated by the field.
Yeah. That's cool. Chad, I'm curious about you. Like, what drew you to the formal education part? Because I think you've been a pretty integral part of the informal community stuff, right?
Yeah. What really drew me to it, I mean, there's a bit of a story there, but it kind of started out where I worked at what is now like part of Oracle. It was a company called Cerner. And I was on the fringe of kind of being in the space of patient safety on a leadership group. And so then I got a hold of a paper by someone, namely John Oswald and the late great Richard Cook, around contrasting views and contrasting views in patient safety, essentially giving a view of what human error is versus not human error, second stories, first stories. And I just kind of read it one weekend, and then I'm like, is there more around this? And just continued to use my weekends to read and read and read. And it actually came in handy when I worked at Cerner because we were in this patient safety group that met weekly. And so then I was able to kind of try to apply that practically into those spaces and get other folks on board with it, which it did help. And so then the short story of that is we had Aaron Reinhardt and Casey Rosenthal. Casey was going through the program at the time, and he's like, "Oh, you're doing all this reading. You're doing all this reading. You should go. You should go. You should go." And then I talked to a few folks like John and Richard, and like, "Oh, you should go. You should go. You should go." So then I kind of took the leap, and my first learning lab in 2020 in January, and then obviously COVID happened. So, but that's how I got introduced. But the big thing I would say people tend to get is the bug, essentially wanting to know more. You search more out, and while there's a mountainous of information, both practical and academic, it's very I think you just kind of want to read more and more and more to the extent. And I guess my interest too is it goes along with incident analysis, but also looking at major disasters and really understanding them from the Challenger and NASA or Columbia or things in those areas. That kind of piqued my interest, given I'm a bit of an 80s kid in that space, and was very aware of that and was at school when some of those things happened. So it's kind of just built on itself, and then it snowballed for me. And I've kind of been a person that's always seeked higher education, I guess, too, in the sense. So, got my undergraduate, went and got my MBA, and then waited a few years. And then this came to my front doorstep, and I'm like, yep, I think I better do it. And so it gives you opportunity to go to, I mean, Lund, Sweden, that's not a bad place to go hang out for a week. And so it just kind of went from there.
I know in January it's a little
Yeah,
bleak.
it is.
But it is beautiful in June, isn't it?
It is. Mm.
John, we've talked a little bit about this in I think the very first This Is Fine episode you did with us. I asked you about your experience getting into resilience engineering, and Lund was part of that story, obviously. I'm curious, you were also you've been an advisor for folks recently in the program. You were in the program in when? 2013?
2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's been a while. Like the program has been around for over 10 years now.
Yep.
Do you know how long? Is it 20 years?
I feel like
15?
I want to say it was
20?
either I feel like it was 2006 maybe or 2009.
So no, it might be 2026. Yeah, because I think
Yeah.
JB, for the folks watching, there are two people we might refer to a lot when we're chatting informally here. JB, who is Johan Bergström, who runs the program at Lund, and Anthony Smoker, who we call Smokes, a lot of us, who also runs the program and is a legend in safety circles, as is JB. So those are the people who are very affiliated with the program itself that we might just chat about. But I think JB is trying to organize like a 20th anniversary thing for next year, which makes me think
Next
it was
year.
2006. So you kind of stepped into the program about 7 years in, but you've seen it now recently because you're advising students. I'm curious about what your perspectives of what has changed about it in the last
wow, what a great question. There's so many things there are lots of things that have changed. But there are lots of things that really warms my heart have not changed as well. So, for example, people who are going through the program right now, and I think at least you three are familiar with Canvas as the Instructure, I think, is the company that puts this together. In fact, I think my kids at Brooklyn Tech have used Canvas. So, like, I mean, here's the thing: any amount of I wish this software could do this thing is nowhere near. Like, I would never say that, because the program that handled all of and this is important because the program is designed for people who have jobs. So you're only on site 3-ish weeks for a learning lab throughout the program over just 2 years or so. And so everything happens in an online tool. Luvit, Luvit, was what I used, and it ran on propane. No, just kidding. Like, it was like, it was really, it wasn't like, it wasn't Lotus Notes, but it might as well be. And so that has changed. Thankfully, this is great. The program had changed, but not in like load bearing ways. Course 1 is always about critical thinking and system safety. Course 2, course 3 are also relatively, they're all in their like nucleus. They're all the same. There are handfuls of assignments that will change. And so, for example, there's a lot more, weirdly, I say weirdly for a couple of reasons, but like there's more cognitive systems engineering material covered these days than it was when I did the program. The first question I don't think has ever changed, and that is words. Does anybody remember what the first question of the first course was?
Oh yeah.
Define safety
do bad
or bad
apples
apples?
exist?
Do bad apples
Yep,
exist? Yeah.
Yep.
Why or why not?
Yeah.
Do that bad apples
bad
exist?
apples exist, which is that's so interesting, right? I found bad apples to be it's not a reference that gets used in tech a lot. I don't
No.
hear managers in tech or people like, so, but it does seem like it is something that gets used in like healthcare a lot, right? Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, so people refer to others as bad apples. So that was a very interesting introduction. I should sort of set a little bit of late ground here for listeners who are totally unfamiliar with what we're talking about. So the Lund University has a program in human factors and system safety. It's a master's of science degree that you can get. And it's specifically geared towards working people, as John mentioned. So they expect that you have a full-time job, and they say that you should work on it about 20, you might be working on it about 20 hours a week. I have questions for you all on that front. But you can also take it without getting a master's. So you can take it for program credit if you don't have a bachelor's degree. It is, as John mentioned, there are only 3 parts of it where you're expected to be in Lund, Sweden on campus, and that's for the 3 learning labs. Learning Lab 1 is in January of the first year you do the program. Learning Lab 2 is in June. Learning Lab 3 is usually like late October, early November. Yeah. And you can also participate, those first 2 learning labs, anybody can participate in just the learning lab. So you don't even have to pay to be getting the graduate degree to go to a learning lab. And my understanding through folklore and gossip is that is actually what John was planning on doing. He showed up for the first learning lab and then got sucked in to doing the program.
Yes.
I think we, on the other hand, if I'm not mistaken, Chad, Jed, and I fully signed up for the program. We showed up. We knew we were going to, be diving in for the full thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I don't know who I was fooling. I mean, I don't know.
Yourself, maybe, John.
But you too,
maybe yourself.
If you're out there and you're thinking about dipping your toe in, you can just sign up to go to a learning lab and then fall head over heels like John did. It's fine.
Just a warning. Like if you're there for a week, and everybody else who's there is having their minds blown right next to you.
Yeah.
So don't be surprised if you go, especially that first one.
Yes.
It's designed to blow your mind. You will blow your mind. And then you're like, well, as Michael Weddick once said, he said, well, that's what I'm doing, I guess, for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and you do develop such a camaraderie, I think, with the people who are there with you, right? And so you want to continue with them because I think this is, let me rewind. I want to ask you each, did you really spend 20 hours? Like how much time did this take for you? Chad, can we start with you?
Yeah. I would say really it depends on the section and topics for the questions is where I spent the time. So it does require a lot of research, but I would say depending on the topic, certain topics I would probably spend more than the 20 hours on that particular section, assignment, topic, because I would dive in, I would do a lot of research. And then there are particular questions I may not have done as much. Just because of time, or I had some interest in it, but it just didn't pique as much interest as other topics within that space. For example, accountability is one area that I dove really deep into, partly because I was in the healthcare space and more of an IT vendor, but seeing that a lot and hearing about it, it was a big thing. So that's just kind of one topic. But yeah, I would say it's average 20 hours, but I would also say that you might spend 30 to 40 hours extra, or like in a week, depending on the topic that you know and love in those spaces. So that's kind of my 2 cents on how it basically works. That 20 hours is average, I would say, in a sense.
Yeah, I resonate with that. I remember I broke my elbow like the week during the module when we were doing Mika Ensley what is it? What is her stupid concept?
Situational
Situational awareness. And I I knocked that one out of the park. Even though I
You
had
sure
to
did.
dictate, I had to dictate it into my microphone to write the paper. But I think it was because it pissed me off so much.
Mhm.
Like all of that pissed me off so much that it like drove me to spend more time. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's when I learned that I had to pick something for my thesis that was driven by spite rather than anything else. Jed, how about you? How long are you finding that you're spending?
So I definitely have found that I could always have spent more time easily, and tried to take to heart what JB said early on, which is even if you're not happy with it, finish it and decide that you finished it, or instead of trying to make it perfect, instead of not sort of turning it in because you feel like it could be better, because you will never feel like it's good enough. And I really took that to heart, because I felt very strongly that I'm in it to do the best I can with the time that I have, not I'm in it to do the best that I can, sort of full stop. So with that said, I think there were many times where I spent about 20 hours or maybe even less because of the rest of my life. And then I think that there were, like Chad said, times when I was super into it and time permitted, and then I could go much deeper.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's is there like 3 or 4 weeks off in between assignments? So it's like, but you get like 2 weeks to kind of like research and write, and then you have 1 week where you will have submitted, but then
Yes,
your peer reviewer has a week
you
to
have a week.
respond to yours, right? So
Yes,
it's like on average 3 to 4 weeks where there will be like this module or whatever, as it were, and you have 2 weeks to hand in the like paper,
yes.
and then 1 week or maybe 2 weeks. Sometimes I always forget
For the review,
for reading and reviewing somebody else's.
I think it was usually 1 week.
1 week. Okay, so it's like 3 weeks
yeah.
total for the module. Yeah. So, if you look at it sort of like you've got 1 week to do your research, you've got 1 week to write your paper, you've got 1 week to review somebody else's paper, usually like 2 or 3 people's papers, right? So that's the thing. And that's why they don't want you to get behind, because other people need to review you need that peer review paper to kind of keep the machine going, right? So yeah.
I found the peer review process personally to be really instructive and also frustrating, because I would read what other people had written and think, oh God, like they articulated it so well, and I've already turned mine in, or they had an insight that you could still use, but it wasn't recorded anywhere in the same way. So I found that process super valuable.
Cool. And then you also have a tutor. So you have somebody who's been through the program and is assigned to you, and it's a different tutor for each sort of section. So that's kind of nice too, to have that support. Did you all lean on your tutor, like any good tutor stories from any of you, like about how helpful that was or wasn't, maybe?
I would say probably my first tutor was pretty good. It was Noel. He had been through a John Allspaw in that group, I believe, and graduated. And I mean, we met quite often, and he was really helpful in like taking each question and basically saying, "Hey, what's the star of the show? What's the star of the topic?" and writing in that way and kind of thinking about that way. And that's kind of what I think. He was a great tutor in that sense, and he was very helpful, especially in my the first section that I had with the new view of human factors and things like that. So I think that really helped me, and he was more than willing to just kind of get on a Zoom and just kind of hop on and talk through things very quickly. I mean, we did have to schedule every now and then, but he was somewhat ad hoc at times, so his availability was pretty awesome. So I would call him out as a great. I didn't want to butcher his last name. I think it's Noel Hollenbrook. I think. Like that. So yeah,
Engelbrook.
Yeah, he was great. So Collaborative Safety, I believe, is their company. So yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about that too, because Collaborative Safety, if you look it up, for those of you who are about to Google something, is a company that consults with child welfare in helping child welfare organizations and different governments do a better job. And there's Noel's group. There are folks who in the Lund program that I met who worked at collaborative safety. I met somebody who worked in maritime stuff, so did investigations for incidents at sea. And like half my class was Dutch pilots. I don't know about you guys, but I don't know what's going on there, but lots of Dutch pilots in my class. So by far, we had somebody from the finance industry in Switzerland who was like in auditing or whatever, compliance or something there. By far, the most interesting thing to me was how all of us had the same things to say when we were talking about totally different workplaces and work things that we were doing. But we all had so much in common and so much intuitive understanding of these concepts based on our work.
Yeah.
And that was really fascinating to me. I'm curious if did anybody that you kind of worked with as a peer kind of stand out as like somebody who was really interesting to you to learn from a different industry? John, anybody?
I can't think of anybody who I can't think of anybody who wasn't. Right. It's like there's aviation, wildfire, firefighting, I mean, like, Officer Hildeberg, who is the head of the Danish Maritime Accident Investigation Board, Noel. These are people who were, and I think Anameta Petri is still an advisor and a mentor. She sat next to me. I was in her class, and I think it's throughout. There were 7 of us, and a relatively small class, I think, compared to what you all have. And everybody went around, and I'm in rail, and there was a woman who was designing submarines for the Swedish Navy, interesting. Like all the sort of the usual suspects. It gets to Noel and goes, "Hi, I work in Tennessee on child welfare," and everybody's like, "Huh." And it goes around, and a sour's there. I'm shipping in maritime, and he's the brow, the furrowed brow, and then it gets to me, and hi, I'm John, and I live in Brooklyn, and I work at Etsy.com. It's a website. Okay, thanks. And Noel and I were like, okay, that's about right. That's strange, weird. It wasn't. I mean, this is the first week. It was. Yeah. That was Monday. I don't think it took. It wasn't. I mean, if it was Tuesday afternoon before we were having those experiences that you just described, like, oh, you have this. Oh, I've got that. Oh, this is what goes on in. Oh, yeah, no, a little bit like that, except for this and that and this and that. Yeah. There was. It was. JB Smokes would describe. Here's this phenomenon, and this. Early on, did a little bit of history here and there, and this is what they used to call it, and this is what they call it now, and it turns out these 2 different things, blah, 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 lots of whiteboard stuff, and we're all just, we're listening, and we're nodding, and I'm nodding, I'm thinking, oh, this makes total sense, obviously, and I've got a picture in my mind. Oh, this is like PCI DSS. Oh, this is like hiring, interviewing for hiring new engineers, right? And I'm like, nodding along, and I look over, and there's Joe Harris, who works in the Office of Learning in wildfire firefighting, wildland firefighting, and he's just like shaking his head. I'm like, wait, what is he nodding about? And that's what the conversations were about.
Yeah.
Everything almost exactly the same, lots of things almost entirely different, and also the same.
Yeah.
But also different,
Yeah,
and
I mean, I think
the differences and the similarities like fit well together. They weren't separating.
Yeah.
They were weirdly unifying.
The biggest difference to me was like people would look at us askance about the tech people askance about how little regulation we are under, right? And I think that was like they're like, wait, you don't have like stuff you have to do like illegally to like be safe. And we're like, and I kept being like, I wouldn't ever say like, no, we don't have to do that. I would be like, not yet.
That's a good. Why do you think I'm here? But I think it goes both ways, right? There's because I don't know about you all, but I mean, somebody from software and say, oh, okay, well, so you're going to investigate this or do an analysis on this accident. Okay, great. What are the big barriers? Well, obviously, barriers, scheduling time to talk with people there. Oh yeah, and I was like, oh yeah, of course, I understand that. Yeah, because they need to make sure their union rep and their legal counsel are there. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, I mean, you must know, right? No.
No,
No.
we don't.
Wait, no.
Yeah. I think, I mean, so a big question that comes up a lot that I think is common, right, for folks who maybe have been out of the academic game for a while or who never were in the academic game to begin with is, why should I spend so much time learning academic theoretical stuff? Right. I'm sort of switching from our like practical, pragmatic, we're having these wonderful conversations at the bar after class with our peers and other industries, right? That's amazing, right? But why should I bother learning all of this theory? What is the value for me when I return back to my day job or whatever every week? Like, why should I do this part? And I'm curious, like, Jed, Chad, like, what do you have thoughts on that?
I mean, I have a quick thought. The quick thought is that I attended a seminar with Jean-Christophe Lacoste, and I asked him a very similar question. I said, this is such academic theoretical stuff. And he said, well, practice informs theory as much as theory informs practice. And so if you want to develop a solid practice, knowing some theory is useful. And developing theories come from actually practicing. And so these things very much go hand in hand. And I have to give him the credit for that answer. But that actually changed the way that I looked at the relationship between theory and practice in many ways, because I always pictured them as very isolated. And now I really don't anymore. I think of them as much more interdependent now. And that's one of the things that a program like this does for you, right? It gives you the ability to take these insights that you maybe take at face value or thoughts you take at face value and turn them completely on their head and give you different perspectives that you never would have had if you go into incident retrospectives now, and the way that you think about all of the things that you were exposed to for years changes fundamentally in very, very real ways. So that's my answer to that.
Chad?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Jed. I would say too, part of that is knowing like having the foundation and the basics of the theory is kind of the initial. It helps you get your mind is blown reaction after you start trying to apply it practically into the spaces you live in and breathe and work in, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I can't unsee what I just now know from a theory perspective. Then I'm like, okay, I can't unsee it. Oh, you're saying human error, but you're just using a label for it. I know that. That happens a lot in tech and in other industries. But that's kind of how I see the theory is theory is kind of your foundations, but then you can't. What the big thing is when you go take the theory and bring it into a space practically, you can't try to get others kind of in your court. You kind of have to kind of peruse and navigate a little bit of the theory, but it's more chop wood, carry water, which we always talk about all the time. But you have to have the basis of theory to be able to even do that.
Yeah.
And so it also like I said, John had talked about in this space around people's minds being blown. Well, the theory is kind of the space that kind of gets that. And then you're like, oh my goodness. And I think one of the big questions they ask after the learning lab, you always hear is, what are you going to do on Monday morning? And I'm like, I mean, like that is such a big thing of like practically, how are you going to apply what you've just learned all for a full week and bring it into your workspace and your work streams and how that works. So I think what Lacou said is right on, but I just think the theory helps you navigate that practicality that you'll need to do within your own work streams and workspaces. So that's kind of my view.
Yeah. John?
I've been thinking about this relationship between theory and practice more and more and more since I graduated, even more so. I've come with respect to our industry, our domain. I think that the framing is used in like for different purposes in different situations. So sometimes people say, "Well, that's great in theory, but I don't know how are you going to apply that." I don't know. How do you apply Conway's law? How do you apply Dunbar's number? What's toil? So like, look, don't say that it's like, oh, and at work we all about practice. We don't do theory. Well, the theory we talk about, and the theory that really is the reason for this is my wrapping my head around the pioneering vanguard on the outer front edge of resilience engineering is the theory of graceful extensibility. And I've been wrapping my head around it for quite some time now. And I realize, like, I'll send you a clip. Sari Riley is a person on the SciShow Tangents podcast, along with Hank Green, famous YouTuber. Sari Riley, also a 30 under 30 luminary, describes the difference between colloquially what we think about as theory, and which is really just like, oh, a hypothesis, you don't have much. And a scientific theory is very different. It is a description. It is an explanation for observations that can be tested. They are real. These are for something to have for something to be a scientific theory, like the theory of graceful extensibility, it needs to have real empirical foundations. We are so enamored in software of naming things. We'll name anything. There may be a name for this podcast in not too long. And what we call things, the words we use are so important to us. And yet some of them are like, toil. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I understand that. You understand?
I know
of course. Yeah.
a lot of I know it when I see it. Yeah.
I know when I see it. Yes.
Right.
Well, yeah, exactly. But the definition of pornography in law is one thing, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about software, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say is at least we would like to assume is founded on scientific foundations.
Yep.
So, having said all that, I think that Lacose was right. Lacose is absolutely right, and I think that you could say that there isn't. I don't know much about my undergraduate degree was in mechanical engineering. I'm sure that there are fields, physics, math, much closer to abstract things. Can't point to them, can't like even describe them really, but it has lots of value. But human factors, system safety, title of the program, encompasses so many fields. There's no such thing as abstract.
Yeah.
There's no abstract in human factors, and there's no abstract in ergonomics, in cognitive systems engineering and resilience engineering. There, you can talk about it and you can publish abstractly conceptual, but you're going to build on others. At some point, there's a phenomenon that took place that you could point to in space and time and say, this is real and concrete and grounded. This isn't what is numbers.
Yeah.
Like in math, right? Prove to me that numbers don't exist. That's amazing. What a great question. It's less, I'm not a mathematician, but my, everything, there isn't really there's not a theory. Oh, this is just abstract and academic. Okay, great. Well, then I'll remind you of that the next time you say the cap theorem. If you want to say it's code for, that seems weird to me. You could just say that seems weird to me because it seems weird to all of us too. That doesn't mean it's, it's weird. It's weird in a not applicable way. So anyway,
I mean, I think it's very true that, like, for as theoretical as things can sometimes seem, they get very concrete very quickly in human factors. And, you know, you only need to look at the list of Lund theses, which I'll point to, in the show notes, to see, the year before mine, one of my favorite theses that I referred to a lot, not necessarily for direct research inspiration, but certainly for kind of overall inspiration, was Mads Muller's thesis on like this student who was the year before me wrote a thesis on what happens when people die and how families kind of come to forgive or not, or like what justice looks like for families of people who've died in accidents or in other sort of circumstances. And that's the most concrete thing I can think of for a
you
thesis,
can't
right?
get more
Very
concrete,
direct,
right?
right?
Yeah.
And there's so much more of that all over the program and the work that gets done. And I've always been really impressed by that. I think I want to sort of end on a little bit of a lighter note, and to say that this isn't not the end. I'm hoping to grab you all and put you on a panel live in front of members of the Resilience and Software Foundation who have more questions about Lund. But for our last little sort of round here for the podcast, can you talk to me about a thesis that you love from Lund? And you can talk about your own if you want, but can you talk to me about a thesis and why you love it?
Can I go last, please?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jed, go ahead. You're first.
Jed.
Oh man, I just spent time reading, and this is a unapproved thesis, right? But I just spent time reading a colleague or co-student of mine. Her thesis is on is air traffic tower reconfiguration a resilience practice, essentially. So when air traffic when an air traffic control system does a reconfiguration, because they have rules they have to follow about how long they can be on, for example. And what I love about it is it's a very different field. And this is going back to what we're talking about from before, how you have these people in all of these different fields, and the commonality becomes why it's called, I think, human factors to start with, right? The commonality is that people are involved, right? And so you get people in an air traffic tower and they need to do an urgent reconfiguration because of somebody failing to show up, and you're breaking a rule by staying, but you're also breaking a rule and putting people's lives at risk if you leave. So how do you do that in a way that sort of, exemplifies your code of conduct and the sort of duty you have to your field and to your craft, while maintaining a resilient system? So that's the one that I actually came to my mind the first, because I see so many parallels in my field, our field, around how graceful extensibility or resilience in software is a extension of the system and what people are doing, right? Very similar to the way air traffic control systems do that. The recent example of the stuff happening in Newark Airport is a great example of something that she was particularly frustrated about because of the press it was getting, because she said, no, the system worked. The software failed and the humans stepped in and made sure that things didn't completely fall apart. And so she was taking it quite personally that people viewed that as a failure. And after she said that, of course, it's one of those examples where I can't think about it any other way now. I wouldn't have before, but I definitely can now. So that's a thesis I love, is the air traffic and tower reconfiguration.
Nice. Can't wait for it to be published. That sounds
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Chad.
Smokes is involved. So
Oh, nice. Of course.
Yeah, probably the thesis that comes to mind is one that I used a lot to structure my thesis of it. I read it a lot due to some of the nature of the theoretical concepts it was leveraging. So it's called MPX, which essentially that's the first acronym, a highway to human error or a stronghold against system variability. So MPX actually stands for Master Pilot Exchange. It's this whole idea around maritime where they do handover communications or essentially exchange of information between the two. And so it kind of went with what my thesis was going to be over. But then I think the big thing around it really kind of honed in on understanding how much to interview, who to interview, what also, I think the big thing that helped me with it was allowed me to look back at their appendices and say, okay, they created this questionnaire matrix that I could kind of leverage and not mimic essentially, and leverage that as part of my research. And I actually got to meet both Michael Schmidt-Schwarzen and Jacob Troll at my Lund graduation. So they were, it was kind of like my eyes were like, oh my gosh, they're superstars, right? Because it was kind of like I got to meet them and talk with them about it, and kind of how they went through their procedures and processes for creating their thesis and what they did for it. So I would say that thesis kind of honed in on and kind of created the areas that I looked at for handover communications and software operations in my qualitative study that I did. So
That's so cool.
Yeah, they were.
You went from this maritime thing and found direct application in software. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's
so Lund.
Exactly. So that's a big thesis I would call out for me.
That's great.
Yeah.
Super cool. All right, John, it's your turn. You're up.
Well, first, let me give a little bit of a, it's a cheap but very accurate and could not be truer answer. And that is, I was this weird software person. First person that come from our world and showed up. This seems applicable, is it? I'm not sure. All of your theses. So, Jed, you can cover your ears for a moment. Hey, Chad, I fucking told you so. Colette, I fucking told you. Don't worry, Jed, yours is coming. But I could not be, what's important to me, I'm going to answer a question you didn't ask, which is, what's important to me are all of the theses, genuinely, that from software that you all have been, that you've all worked on and contributed to. There are people who are, when you're working on your thesis, when you're about to be where Jed Needle is wading in, some of the hardest times is to think, why am I doing this? This is really hard. That's
why you got to pick something that pisses you off, Jed.
You
That's
pick
my
something. Yes, spike driven is absolutely
I need to tap into my spite engine, I think, Colette.
whatever floats your boat, right? Whatever gets you moving. But there are time since my thesis and my time in the program gives me a perspective that is much more longitudinal. And every time somebody from software contributes to the field, and everyone has, it's compounding, like compounding interest. It's not some sort of linear thing. Big surprise there. People have cited your theses and continue. And so, this is what I'm trying not to say. I love all of the people that came after me, but I just needed to say that it's going to be a while where the contributions from Lund students in software are entirely 1000% software and nowhere else. And I think that's amazing, because we're not just revalidating your fine, your handover communication. There was really, I think, maybe 2 other domains that had but the fact of the matter is mostly healthcare. Am I wrong?
Yeah,
Chad?
they're mostly healthcare. Yeah.
And that was your thesis, Colette. Your the work on anything involving probabilistic risk assessments or HRA or any sort of let's predict the future by using some math or stats. And where do they come from? They came from our butts. That's
Our very intuitive butts, John.
That's an evergreen topic,
Yeah.
and it's the topic that showed up right after the event that Dave Woods and Richard said kickstarted their careers, 3 Mile Island.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so it's I'm in love with all of them. I will say the original question. The answer is Karen Raymer, Dr. Karen Raymer, Canadian. I want to treat the patient, not the alarm. User image mismatch in anesthesia alarm design. I'm sorry, I come from ops. If that does not have, show me what the world of SRE and software looks like.
Yep.
Without talking about SRE and software. I mean, come on. Now, if you had, Lund, that is the thesis that sort of drove me. And I've emailed her probably 6 times since graduation saying, just want to remind you once again, thanks a lot. That was a really big deal. Thank you very much. There are others that really, really fueled my spite, passion, drive. But yeah, it's too hard. It's too hard. That's the most concise answer I could give.
Wow. Thanks, John. And thanks all three of you. I'm hoping we can find some time on July 31st. We've got to put our heads together after this call and figure that out. But we will find some time in about a month. I'll keep everybody posted on the podcast for a live event where you can ask these fine folks all about their experiences at Lund. And I don't know, I have an unanswered email out to JB and Smokes. I'm going to really try to get some Lund people to come and also be available to talk. Thank you so very much for answering Clint and I's burning questions about Lund. And we'll see you very soon, live.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Nice.